Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome back to Reading with Raptors. I am here in our program room with one of our resident red-tailed hawks, who we call Alula. She's been doing some very delightful head tilting as she's looking around all the things in this room. I was moving the book around earlier to kind of test it, and she was really kind of investigating it. So hopefully we'll see lots of excellent kind of investigatory behavior from her as we read this morning. We're back indoors since here in Minnesota in the Twin Cities area it is pretty chilly outside and we're expecting some snow later. So we'll hopefully find some new fun places to read in as we get into the winter here. But I'll say a few things about Alula before we start as we have more people join us before we start reading. But this particular bird has been with us here for I think about 14 years teaching people about red-tailed hawks. So normally going out on programs, has been learning how to do lots of online programs as well, which has been fantastic. This particular bird is with us because she actually has some blind spots in her eyes, most likely caused by the West Nile virus. All kind of evidence that we were able to find kind of pointed towards that being the cause. So that's made her unable to be released back out into the wild, since that eyesight is really so important for raptors. They really need to be able to see really everything that's going on around them. So works great for learning how to teach people about red-tailed hawks on the glove and in programs, things like that, but wouldn't be good enough eyesight to be able to really go out and hunt those small, fast animals like mice and rabbits and squirrels and things like that. So that is why this bird lives with us here at the Raptor Center. So today we are going to actually be talking a bit about flight. Someone brought in this wonderful book called Birds, Nature's Mangificent Flying Machines. Checking out the book. This one is by Caroline Arnold and illustrated by Patricia J. Wynne. So it has these wonderful drawn birds. Sorry, I'm getting such a kick out of the head tilting. Wonderful drawn birds on it, and it's got a lot of really excellent information about how birds fly and how flight really works. So I'm hoping it'll be a good one for today. And we've got her foot is fully tucked up, just kind of looking around at everything that's going on. So let's see what else she does as we read about Birds, Nature's Magnificent Flying Machines. So here right away it says, why fly? One spring day in 1804, when the great painter and naturalist John James Audubon was a teenager, he spied a pair of phoebes near his home in Pennsylvania. The birds were building a nest on a rocky ledge. Later, after the eggs in the nest hatched, Audubon watched the phoebes dart through the air, catching insects to feed their hungry babies. The young birds grew fast and in a few weeks were ready to fly. They spread their wings, flapped, and flew a short distance. Audubon was amazed at how quickly they became experts, even though they had never flown before. Almost all birds can fly. Flying helps birds find food, reach safe places for building nests, escape from predators on the ground, and travel easily over long distances. It helps them survive. Here are those eastern phoebes, small insect-catching birds we have across most of the eastern United States. Here it also says nature's flyers. Birds, bats, and insects are the only group of living animals that can fly. Of course, birds are by far the largest, fastest, and most powerful. So here we have Audubon watching these phoebes on their cliffside nests. Let's find out more about flying. This one says, lightweights of the world. Lightweight bodies help birds to be good flyers. If you jump off a chair, no matter how high you jump or how hard you flap your arms, you land on the floor. But when a bird takes off into the air, it is so light it can overcome the pull of gravity. A bird's skeleton is made of thin, hollow bones. The skull is also thin and lightweight, and instead of a heavy jaw with teeth, a bird has a much lighter beak without teeth. Just one moment. My behind the scenes. I had set up the camera and everything, and then it just gave me an alert that it is low on battery because I didn't plug it in. Let me quick do that before we keep reading so it don't actually cut off here. There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Where were we? We were talking about the light weights of the world. So another thing that makes a bird's body light is a series of air sacs that fill spaces between other organs. Most birds have 9 air sacs. They are connected to the lungs and help a bird to use more of the air it takes in with each breath. So here are a few other kind of pieces of information and I'll kind of show you close up. So it says inside a bird's body, the large muscles that lift a bird's wing are anchored on the breastbone or sternum and are attached to the upper wing bone or humerus. The wishbone or furcula, which is flexible in some birds, is connected to the breastbone. Here, I'll show you this really close up. So this is a blue-footed booby, which is a nice kind of shore/water bird that you normally find kind of closer down to the equator where it's a bit warmer. And so you can see here's that breastbone or the sternum. Here's the wishbone. We also call it the furcula. Here's the coracoid bone, which is kind of part of the shoulder bones of these birds. This is the humerus or the upper arm bone. Here are the radius and ulna, which are kind of the lower arm bones in most other animals. Down here underneath, kind of down in the rib cage area, we have here the lungs here in purple, just like the lungs that we have, a little bit different in structure, but kind of how we breathe using our lungs. But then to help them really get the most oxygen out of that air, these things in red here are the air sacs that kind of act like a set of bellows to kind of move the air through so that it can stay in the lungs longer. It also makes these birds extra lightweight. So to give you an idea, the humerus and then the radius and ulna, this is our humerus, this bone up here. The radius is the bone kind of along the side of your arm, and then the ulna is this one out here. So you've kind of 2 bones here in our lower arm, and the humerus up here. And then the sternum is the kind of flat bone in the middle of your rib cage. Kind of give you an idea of where all these things are on people. It also here has a picture of the bird's skull. So this is also, I think, from this blue-footed booby. And this is opening in a bird's skull help to make it light. So you can see all of these different kind of open spaces inside of the skull. Compared to us mammals, we have big, kind of thick, heavy skulls with lots of kind of closed off spaces to make them a lot stronger, a lot more kind of sturdier, which works just fine for us on the ground. We don't need to get up into the air. And then one more thing here, a bird bone close up. If you cut a bird's bone lengthwise, the inside looks something like a honeycomb. This network of support strengthens the bone in the same way that struts help support a bridge. So here's the bird's bone. You can see this hollow part here. And then up close in this little magnifying glass, you can see that it's got these open spaces with lots of little kind of support beams that cross over it, make it really strong, but still really lightweight. Some of you are noticing some of the excellent behaviors and activities that Alula is getting up to behind us, really investigating this book. She seems to find it kind of interesting to look at. I was doing some preening earlier too. Maybe we'll learn about feathers as we keep reading. So here we have designed for flight. Birds need wings to fly. Look at a bird's wing from the side. It has a thick front edge and a downward curve towards the back. The distance over the top is greater than the distance across the bottom. When a bird moves through the sky, the air at the front of the wing separates as it flows over the wing surface. The air traveling over the top goes faster than it does across the bottom. That's because it must go a longer distance in the same amount of time. The difference in airspeed causes a difference in air pressure. This pulls the wing at the top, pushes it from below, and creates a force called lift. Lift is what keeps a bird up in the air while it is flying. So here, I'll start with this kind of diagram here. So you can see the kind of shape here, how it's kind of round at the front and kind of narrower at the back and kind of curves upward to create that longer distance. So here it says lift. If you hold a piece of paper by one edge and blow across the top of it, like this person here is doing, you can see how lift is created. The faster moving air on top of the paper pulls it up. Engineers use this principle when designing the wings of airplanes. So you can see this person is kind of blowing on this curved piece of paper and it kind of causes it to lift up. Down here it says creating lift. The more quickly air moves over the top of the wings, the more lifting power they have. One way that a bird can create is lifting power is by tilting its wings to increase their curve. So a bird can control how these wings kind of move to create more lift. So here you can see these American flamingos soaring through the air, flapping their wings. You can see that kind of curved shape, how the wind might kind of go over the top of these wings and create that lift. So this is something that you can try. It's holding a piece of paper so it kind of curves down and then blowing over the top of it, watching how that paper will kind of lift up as you blow air over it to kind of mimic how a bird's wing works. And since we kind of copied them, how airplane wings work too. So feathers. Feathers are important for flying too. Long feathers on the wing, called flight feathers, make the wing bigger and give it shape. Tail feathers are used for steering. Short, smooth contour feathers cover the body and give it a streamlined shape. Short, fluffy down feathers lie next to the skin and help keep the bird warm. Most feathers have a hollow center shaft with thin hair-like strands called barbs on either side. The barbs are connected to each other by tiny hooks called barbules. These help give a flight feather its smooth, airtight surface. Here's a picture of a feather close up. So this is kind of that main center of that feather that we call the shaft of the feather. Off of the feather, we have the barbs that are coming off. And then really tiny, we have these barbules that kind of connect each of the barbs. So that's why you can have these feathers that are composed of these individual tiny little strands, but they all kind of hook together to create a really kind of solid surface that's very flexible, but very strong. Here it says about flight feathers. On the shaft of a flight feather, the barbs on one side, here in blue, are longer, on the barbs on one side here in orange are longer than on the other. So the leading edge here in blue, this is the front edge of the feather, and then this is the trailing edge. So this blue side is what actually kind of meets the wind first, and then the orange is what meets the wind second, or kind of is creating that long curved surface. This is I'm going to call this Temminck's tragopan, which is kind of like a pheasant. Temminck's. I think that's how you say that. Temminck's tragopan. These are the contour feathers, which are short and compact with barbs of equal length. So you can see they're very symmetrical and kind of fluffy down towards the bottom. And then down here, we have the down feathers, which have no shaft. The silky fibers grow from a common point. So they're these little fluffy down feathers. This is a down feather. So it's super kind of fluffy and soft. Doesn't really have much structure to it. And then here it says molting. Have you ever found a feather on the ground? Once a year, a few at a time, a bird's old feathers fall out and new feathers grow in. This process is called molting. So here we have these tiny feathers down here that this tragopan is molting out. Very colorful bird. So that's a bit about feathers. What else? Of course, we go from feathers to wings. A bird's wings are its arms. The longest wing feathers, called primaries, are on the hand. These provide the power for flight as the bird moves its wing down in the air. The secondary feathers are on the forearm and give the wing its curved shape. The shorter tertiary feathers are on the upper arm and help make a smooth connection between the wing and body. Rows of short covert feathers go across the top of the wing and give it a curved edge. The bones inside the wings are similar to those in your arm and hand. In the bird's hand, though, the finger bones are connected. This helps make the end of the wing strong. The thumb bone at the front of the wing is called the alula. Feathers attached to the alula help direct the airflow across the wing so the bird does not stall or fall when it flies slowly. Some of you who were here at the beginning when I introduced this red-tailed hawk might recognize the name Alula, since that is what we call this red-tailed hawk, and it's after this very important group of feathers. So here we have a picture of an arm, a human arm and hand, and then here are the bones of a bird's wing. So they're kind of lined up so you can compare them. We both have the humerus here, the radius and ulna here, kind of a forearm. This is kind of the equivalent of the thumb bone, and then these are the finger and wrist bones all kind of fused together. So you can see kind of where everything would connect. So kind of these very long primary feathers are attached down here, secondary feathers here, and then the tertiaries down here. So here that is with all the feathers on it on this scarlet macaw. You can see this beautiful wing. So here we have the primary feathers down here, these very long primary feathers that are so important for flight. The secondary feathers here really giving it the rest of this kind of nice broad surface. And then these tertiary feathers down here are helping to attach in to the rest of the body. And then up here along this edge, we have the coverts, which kind of help to cover that surface and make it very aerodynamic. Then something that we maybe noticed earlier too with this red-tailed hawk is preening. Here's a picture of a scarlet macaw preening some of those wing feathers. A bird needs to preen or clean its feathers to keep them smooth for flying. As the bird slides each feather through its beak, it is like pulling up a zipper. Any strands that were separated hook together again. While preening, the bird also spreads body oil over its feathers to make them waterproof. So if you're ever watching a bird preening, you might notice that they'll take their beak and kind of rub it along the top of their tail. There's a special gland there that makes a very important oil that helps to keep their feathers very clean and conditioned and a little bit waterproof. So that oil is very important for birds for a lot of reasons. So you'll see them kind of rubbing their faces near the top of their tail. That's what they're doing, is collecting that oil from that gland and spreading it over their feathers. Taking off. Sorry, I really enjoy all of the head tilting. Really kind of investigating this kind of new thing with this book. So, taking off. Taking off from the ground is the hardest part of flying. A bird must flap its wings so fast that they will create enough airspeed to lift the bird into the air. This uses a great deal of energy. Whenever possible, a bird takes off facing the wind. The air blowing over the surface of the wings gives the bird a head start. Heavy birds have a harder time taking off than small birds do. A sparrow can fly right up into the air from a standing start. A gull, on the other hand, may have to run along the ground to gain enough speed for takeoff. Ducks paddle across the surface of the water to increase their takeoff speed. Herons bend their long legs and jump into the air. Eagles and vultures usually perch on cliffs or the tops of tall trees. Up there, they can spread their wide wings and catch the wind. So here are all those things that were just kind of mentioned. You can see here these arrows kind of representing the wind speed and kind of the direction that it's coming from. The bald eagles lifting out those huge wings to catch that wind. Here we have a black-headed gull running along the beach to kind of take off. Here we have a ruddy duck running across the surface of the water so it can take off. Here is a black-crowned night heron using those long legs to launch itself into the air. And here we have a tiny white-throated sparrow just taking straight up off of that little branch. Now that brings us to flapping. Flapping gives a bird the power to fly. As the ends of the wing move down through the air, they pull the bird forward. Air rushing over the wing lifts the bird into the air. To begin flapping, and here are all the steps that line up with the pictures here. Number 1, the bird lifts its wings high. Number 2, it moves the wings forward and down. The flat surface of the wing pushes the air like a broad paddle. Number 3, the downward motion is completed. Number 4, the bird lifts its wings back and up. Number 5, now it opens the feathers like the slats on a window blind. Number 6, this helps air flow through them and makes it easier for the bird to raise its wings. And number 7, when they are fully lifted, the bird is ready to begin its next downward stroke. So here you can see how it kind of, sorry, trying to hold this and there we go. So this duck, this pintail duck, has its wings open wide, powerful kind of stroke downward. Down here, right at the crease of the book, it's finishing flapping its wings down. You can see here how it kind of is pushing its wings almost backwards to really decrease or kind of reduce the amount of resistance from the air. Here you can see it kind of opening up these gaps in between the feathers to kind of help them move back through the air. Here kind of finishing lifting those wings back up. And then number 7, we're back to where we started, ready to flap downwards again. You can kind of mimic this if you ever go swimming or kind of in the bathtub or something, where if you push against the water with your closed hand, you can feel the kind of force that you're pushing. But if you open your hand up like this, you don't really generate a lot of force. It's kind of harder to move things around. So you can kind of see how this works in air. For us, it's a little bit easier to feel it in water. But you can see why birds need to kind of adjust their feathers a lot to kind of increase the resistance on the downstroke and then open up those feathers and decrease the resistance while they move their wings back up. So here it says, slow and fast flappers. Small birds flap faster than big birds do. Large birds like vultures flap about once a second. Medium-sized birds like doves and crows flap 2 or 3 times a second. Little birds like chickadees beat their wings about 30 times a second. And a tiny hummingbird may flap its wings up to 80 times per second. This is so fast that the wings look like a blur. So here we have our turkey vulture with these big soaring wings that might not need to flap very much at all. Our kind of medium-sized birds who just need to flap a bit to keep up into the air. These little birds need to flap quite a bit, and then the tiny hummingbirds, you can imagine where they get their name, that humming sound as they're buzzing through the air, flapping their wings 80 times a second. It's incredible. A wing for every purpose. Each kind of bird has wings that are best for its way of life. Birds that spend most of their time on the ground often have short, rounded wings. This shape is good for darting and turning quickly. A grouse, for example, uses its powerful wings to fly up quickly when danger is near. Fast-flying birds usually have long, pointed wings. This shape is built for speed. Swallows and swifts flap their long wings as they chase insects into the air. Soaring birds have large wings for maximum lift. Birds that soar over the sea, such as albatrosses, usually have long, narrow wings that are good for riding with the wind. Birds that soar more slowly over land, such as a hawk, like this red-tailed hawk, have large, wide wings that are better for catching gentle breezes. So here we have, I'll show you this whole page, a variety of bird wing shapes. So here we have the red-tailed hawk with these very big, long, broad wings. It's kind of kite-like tail, great for catching those breezes. Their kind of ocean counterpart, who does a lot of soaring, is like the albatross, which have these massive, enormous wings, longer than some people are tall. These giant wings that are great for soaring those very, very long distances and those kind of higher-powered oceanic winds. Here's the ruffed grouse, which has these very short, round wings that are great for just getting up into a tree and escaping predators. We have the chimney swift, some very, very fast birds that are great for turning and really building up speed. So they have these very long, pointy wings for their tiny little bodies. We have sandhill cranes, which need these kind of big, kind of broad wings to be able to travel huge distances. And then our night flyers, like this spotted owl, it says, an owl has soft feathers across the surface of its wings that muffle the noises made by flapping. This helps an owl approach its prey without being heard. So owls have kind of shorter, rounder wings for kind of slower, sneakier flight. And then those soft feathers over the top that really help them to sneak up on their food. I think we have a few pages left. Yeah. Making sure we have a good amount of time. Gliding and soaring. Once a bird is in the air, it can often go for long distances without flapping at all. The wings still provide lift while gliding, but without flapping, the bird will gradually sink to the ground. The best gliders are birds with big wings. The broad surfaces of their wings provide a great deal of lift. Gulls, eagles, vultures, and albatrosses are all good gliders. An albatross can glide for miles. Soaring is a type of gliding. Soaring birds use rising air currents to lift them into the air. Air rises when the sun heats the ground unevenly or when wind blows against the side of a mountain or building. Ocean birds soar on air currents made by wind blowing across the uneven surface of the waves. So here are a few things, a few really excellent diagrams. This one is about thermals. So if you see a bird soaring upward in circles, it is riding a thermal. A thermal is a column of warm air created by the uneven heating of the ground. The air spins as it rises. A thermal can quickly carry a bird up a mile or more in the sky. It is like an invisible elevator. So here's a sharp-shinned hawk, this little rounded wings, using this warm current of air that's spinning up into the sky. You can see it starting down here, spinning around, and ending up here, way up high in the sky. You'll often see red-tailed hawks like this one using those thermals as well. So you see them soaring in these big circles in the sky. This is actually another reason why most of these soaring birds you'll mainly see during the daytime, since that's when we have the sun out to heat the ground. So you usually won't see them out too early or too late. Usually in the middle of the day is when you see a lot of these birds, since that's when you have the most of this kind of warm air with those thermals. And here it also says ocean winds. Here's an excellent diagram of how those move around. In the open ocean, the wind blows almost constantly. By diving toward the water and then turning into the wind, birds can gain speed and lift. This is called dynamic soaring. The albatross glides on strong wings. So this is the wandering albatross. Some species, actually many species of albatross, don't even return to land for several months at a time. They might be spending weeks and weeks doing this dynamic soaring to make their way across the oceans without actually touching down at all. Another excellent type of flying is hovering. Here we have an American kestrel, another type of small raptor, along with a group of hummingbirds, different kinds. So, have you ever watched a bird stay in one place while it flaps? It is hovering. Kestrels often hover as they search the ground for small animals. They flap their wings in a forward motion and tuck their tails underneath them as a brake. Most birds hover while facing into the wind. The wind blows them backward at the same rate that they are moving forward, so they stay still. So you can see here this American kestrel using its wings and its tail to hover in place while looking for this tiny mouse down on the ground. And here are these hummingbirds. The champions of hovering are the hummingbirds. These tiny birds can even fly backward for short distances. As the hummingbird hovers, it turns its body upward and flaps its thin, pointed wings. The wings turn at the shoulders so that the hummingbird gets lift on both the up and down strokes. So they, instead of kind of flying like this, they'll rotate their wings so they're flapping like this so that they kind of get lift as they're flapping their wings in both directions. So here are all the different ways that these different hummingbirds can move their wings. This one says steering. Watch a bird to see how it changes its speed and direction as it flies. By raising or lowering its wings and twisting its tail, it can turn itself right or left. To move upward, the bird lifts its tail and lowers the back edge of its wings. To aim itself downwards, the bird lowers its tail and raises the back edge of its wings. With what looks like little effort, the bird is able to control its movements exactly. Young birds know how to fly without being taught, but they have to practice until they become experts at steering and landing. So here you can see a cardinal adjusting its wings and tail. You can see how it's moving through this air current here, becoming an expert at flying. And then for landing, landing is the most dangerous part of flying. If a bird lands too hard or fast, it could crash and hurt itself. If it comes in too slowly, it could miss its target. All birds use their wings and tails as brakes to catch the air and slow their speed when landing. Birds such as magpies and crows, which land in trees, often approach a branch from below and then reach out with their feet to grab it. Birds such as seagulls, which land on the ground, often come to a running stop. Ducks, geese, and swans, like many water birds, hold their feet in front and skid across the top of the water as they land. So here's a black-billed magpie grabbing onto this branch, kind of swooping up from below. Whereas here is a Ross's seagull running across the sand as it comes down to a landing. Ooh, this one's very relevant for those of us watching a lot of geese doing their migrations right now. Long-distance flyers. Some birds stay in one place year-round. Others travel or migrate with the seasons. They migrate to find food, safe places for breeding, and better weather. Flying makes it possible for birds to cross natural barriers such as mountains, deserts, rivers, and oceans. Many birds fly thousands of miles each year. Snow geese spend the summer in the Arctic. In the winter, they fly as far south as Mexico. You can hear them honk as they fly overhead. So here is a diagram of them flying in that V formation. There's a little more info over here, but you can see these big groups of them flying in those V shapes. So flying in formation. Wild geese and ducks often fly in large V-shaped formations when they migrate. As each bird flaps its wings, it produces a swirl of rising air. The bird flying behind it can use this rising air to get extra lift. This helps it save energy for the long journey. The birds take turns leading the group because that is the most tiring position. So you can see here how this front bird is kind of generating lift, and each kind of bird is generating lift for the bird behind it. Oh, really good stretch. You can see those very long, broad wings that our red-tailed hawk behind us has as she stretches that out. So you can see them generating that lift, and then they'll take turns. So excellent teamwork as they migrate in groups. And then, of course, the long-distance champion. The Arctic tern has the longest known migration route. It flies 12,000 miles from the Arctic to the tip of South America. So this is this Arctic tern that makes that incredible journey every year. So down south for the winter and then back up north for the spring. Incredible distance. Okay, just wanted to see how many pages we had left. Fast flyers, slow flyers, and no flyers. The fastest known bird is the peregrine falcon. When diving for prey, it can reach speeds of over 200 miles per hour. In still air, or kind of not moving air, most birds fly slower than 50 miles per hour. The average speed of a migrating hawk is about 30 miles per hour, or similar to kind of a car on a small road. The maximum speed of a ruby-throated hummingbird is 26 miles per hour. How fast a bird flies depends on the shape of its wings, as well as where it is going, and whether it is flying with or against the wind. Some birds can't fly at all. They have other ways of surviving in the places where they live. Ostriches run on long, sturdy legs. Penguins use their paddle-shaped wings for swimming. The kiwi, which lives in the forests of New Zealand, hides from predators in burrows in the ground. So does the kakapo, a flightless New Zealand parrot. So here we have a peregrine falcon with those long pointy wings zooming through the air. A swallow-tailed kite is also a very fast flyer. And here is a tiny buff-bellied hummingbird zooming through the air. Here we have our penguins who have modified their wings to be very good at moving through the water. An ostrich who famously runs around on those big long legs. And then the kiwi and the kakapo who both live in areas of New Zealand where they didn't really have many ground predators, so they didn't really need to fly. They found other ways of surviving on the ground. I was just talking about that preening gland, and here our red-tailed hawk is reaching down to do that exact preening motion. So if you keep an eye on her, she might do more of it. Are birds the only ones? Birds are vertebrates, or animals with bony skeletons, like us. The only other living vertebrates that can fly with powered wings are bats. Nearly 1,000 different kinds of bats live all over the world. Bats are night flyers, while most birds are active during the day. A few other bony animals can glide in the air. They are not true flyers, but some can go long distances before landing. Gliders include flying fish, flying squirrels, flying frogs, and even some snakes. So I'll go kind of clockwise around here. Pterosaurs. In dinosaur times, there were flying reptiles called pterosaurs. Some of them had wings 40 feet long from tip to tip. Pterosaurs are now extinct. They had a very different way of flying too. Different kind of bones in their arms that were modified to make these kind of membrane wings, which is kind of more like skin stretched across to make that surface. Bats. A bat's wings are formed by thin skin stretched between its body and the bones of its large hands. So whereas birds kind of have their finger bones fused to make kind of one surface and using feathers, bats, their wings are their hands all spread out with skin kind of stretched between each of those long finger bones. So they have a lot of control over how they move their wings. Now here are our gliders. Flying frogs. These huge webs between their feet allow these frogs to glide like parachutes. Similarly, we have some tree snakes that can bend their bodies into flat planes and glide to the ground. Look at how flat they can get. The flying fish. Some fish leap out of the water and spread out their large fins like sails to glide in the air. And flying squirrels. These tree dwellers have flaps of skin along the sides of their bodies that they stretch out to catch the air when gliding from tree to tree. So lots of different animals have found reasons for moving through the air. Here's our last page with all of these different flying birds. Masters of the air. The oldest known bird lived 150 million years ago during the age of the dinosaurs. Its name was Archaeopteryx. It had a tail and teeth like a reptile, but it flew on feathered wings. Archaeopteryx was not a strong flyer, but over time its descendants, or cousins, became experts in the air. Mastery of the skies has allowed birds to live almost every place on Earth. Today there are nearly 10,000 species of birds. They have made their homes in places ranging from polar tundra to tropical forests, and from country fields to crowded cities. As we watch these aerial acrobats flit from branch to branch and soar in the sky above, we see how perfectly suited birds are to life in the air. They are truly magnificent flying machines. So here we have all of these different birds. I know it's been a while since we read a book about feathered dinosaurs. Here we have, this is a drawing of what Archaeopteryx might have looked like based off of fossil records. Now this book, I believe I saw the copyright was 2003. Since then, we've actually learned a lot more about our flying dinosaurs and kind of the ancestors of birds. It seems to be now that Archaeopteryx probably wasn't the direct ancestor of a lot of birds, but kind of a cousin of whatever kind of ancestor, maybe both of this animal, this kind of flying dinosaur, and these modern flying dinosaurs or birds might have shared. So really interesting research on this particular bird, but it remains a really great example of that fossil evidence and evidence for really old feathers. So this has been Birds, Nature's Magnificent Flying Machines. This was by Caroline Arnold with these amazing illustrations by Patricia J. Wynne. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm going to scroll through really quick because I saw a decent amount of chatter on in the questions in the chat. So let me just quick scroll back through and see. But a lot of people were really admiring Alula. This is the red-tailed hawk who I have with me today. As I was saying earlier, this bird lives with us because she actually had the West Nile virus, or most of the evidence that we've been able to find points toward that being the case. And what can happen with West Nile virus, especially in hawks, is that it can cause some kind of scarring in their eyes. So she actually has some blind spots in her eyes that we can't really fix. It's kind of permanent scarring there. That makes it kind of hard for her to see well enough to survive in the wild. So she can see pretty well in this room and functioning here as an educational bird, but being out in the wild trying to do some of that hunting on her own might be kind of tricky. She might not be able to see well enough to do that. But you could see her really getting the most out of that very flexible neck to look around, especially at the book. Seems to be pretty interesting. But given that she has had all of her feathers really fluffed, she was preening and stretching, we can tell that this bird is probably pretty comfortable just while investigating that book moving around. Yeah, so somebody was pointing out those head turns are often something that you see on some pretty young birds who are still pretty kind of young and learning things and kind of curious. This bird tends to do them quite a bit too, especially again when kind of in this really relaxed, kind of comfortable state, really kind of investigating things. But yeah, she is in her kind of early teens. So for a red-tailed hawk, she's not a very young red-tailed hawk, but definitely still has that kind of interest in looking around at these newer things. Like she doesn't usually see books up close. Making sure that I didn't miss any questions and things. This bird is reminding some people maybe of their other birds. Yeah, definitely. I always always really enjoy seeing all those signs that we associate with kind of a comfortable, relaxed bird who's not, preparing physically to fly somewhere. Normally you'll see right now her feathers are all really fluffed out. You can especially tell down by her legs how you can't see her legs. You can only see her toes sticking out from underneath those fluffy feathers. That's kind of a good metric to show you how fluffed out those feathers are. If a bird is preparing to fly somewhere because maybe they are worried and maybe something might be dangerous to them, they'll slick all those feathers in close to their body to be really nice and aerodynamic. You'll usually see them kind of looking around for somewhere to fly to. Whereas this bird, all those feathers are relaxed. Her feet are kind of relaxed on the perch. She's looking around really casually and kind of tilting her head to look at the book and everything. So that's usually kind of what I'm keeping an eye on when I'm kind of evaluating a bird and kind of the situation that we're in. Oh, where do the hawks usually live? Thank you for that question. This is from Harrison, who's in first grade. Where do the hawks usually live? So red-tailed hawks, you can actually find all over here in North America. So you can find them in a huge range of habitats. Normally their kind of main habitat is what we call the edge, kind of where the forest and the prairie meet. So think big open grassy areas with kind of some occasional tall perches. What this actually ends up meaning is that we see a lot of red-tailed hawks living close by people, since a lot of our cities and suburbs actually kind of mimic their natural habitat. Think of a suburb or a park in a city. It's a big open flat area with lots of trees and things like that around. You'll also see them a lot near highways. Next time you're in the car or on the bus, take a look out the windows at those big tall electrical poles and light poles, big tall poles on the side of the road. You'll often see these very large kind of tan and brown birds standing on top of those poles because we've kind of mimicked their natural habitat. We have those big grassy ditches on the side of the highways. There's usually a bit of litter and garbage on the side of those roads, which means that we have lots of small animals sneaking around to eat all of that garbage, which means that we have our red-tailed hawks showing up to stand on those tall perches and then swoop down and grab those small animals off of the ground. So you'll often see them hunting on the side of the road. I know here in the Twin Cities, we have a lot of red-tailed hawks who are kind of living all along those highways. I usually drive on Highway 36, and pretty much every intersection has a pair of red-tailed hawks holding down the fort at kind of each little mile along the highway. So hopefully you have some red-tailed hawks near where you live if you keep an eye out for them. They are pretty big raptors, so they're pretty easy to keep an eye out for once you know what you're looking for. So big kind of brownish tan bird standing on those tall perches or soaring in big open spaces. See them a lot at our state parks too, or if you're in a different area, some national parks or other kind of large grassy areas, usually have a lot of red-tailed hawks. Make sure we don't have any last questions. These were fantastic. All right, I think that was everything for today, but thank you all so much for joining us for more Reading with Raptors. We'll be back next week with a different bird and a new book to read, so definitely check us out. In the meantime, keep an eye, as always, on this Facebook page. You can also check us out on our website at theraptorcenter.org for more information about all the fun stuff that we're up to, especially online with all of our programs and videos. And if you want more information about birds and how you can get involved, check us out, theraptorcenter.org. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We will see you all next week for more Reading with Raptors. Have a great day.